Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the SAPEX stage, Tanya Kabalin.
Good morning. I thought yesterday was early, but today feels a little earlier and a couple of people are still coming in, so let's let them find their seats. When Mungo called me, I think it was back in November, Mungo, already, gosh, it's a long time, and said, would you mind doing a bit of a keynote at this SAPEX 2017 convention? I bit your hand off with excitement, I think. The opportunity to engage with professionals like you on two subjects very dear to my heart. The one is the potential that resides in the supply chain, and the second is the power of good leadership and what happens when you bring those two things together. So I was enormously excited about it. Until he then phoned me about 2 months ago and said, well, we've got the agenda now, and you're going to be going first on the first day. And I panicked. I went, good God, nothing like a bit of pressure to open SAPEX 2017. So it was with huge relief when he called me 2 weeks ago and said, no, actually, Tanya, could you switch to Tuesday because Sean has to get back to the UK? And I went, yes, Sean, it's yours, buddy. Off you go. And I was breathing a little easier until I started preparing for the session and had a look at what the agenda was looking like. Scrolled through Tuesday and found that none other than Clem Sunter gets to speak after me. Can I tell you about what the panic did then as it went off the chart? I guess there's nobody in the room here who doesn't know Clem, right? Well, in case you don't, he's only like the godfather of scenarios. And if he is in the room with us, I did see him earlier. What he doesn't know is I met him many years ago at my matric graduation. Can you believe it? He was the keynote speaker at my matric graduation. And he gave me a piece of advice, me because I felt he was speaking only to me, of course. But to the rest of the Rodine girls at that time, his advice to us was, don't wait for the world to come to you, go to the world. Well, Clem, I took your advice. I headed offshore. I spent 11 years in the UK, and maybe his advice had something to do with the fact that we share a stage today. So if he is in the room, I need to thank him for giving me that piece of advice. But I am hugely excited about being here today, and I had the added benefit on Friday and Saturday of working with 25 of you at the summit that we ran for the executives. And my goodness me, the insights I got from the realities of running supply chains in South Africa and internationally, I can only thank you all for educating me as much as you did. You all know Clem, but I imagine there's only a few of you who know who the hell I am. So I guess I should probably introduce myself a bit more than that wonderful voiceover does. And I think first of all, we should just set some expectations between us. So the first thing is I'm not a supply chain expert. Okay? I'm not a supply chain professional even. I don't have any of those wonderful letters after my name that everybody else had that spoke yesterday. In fact, I'm not entirely sure what those letters mean, but they sound very impressive. I don't have them. I'm a business major from WITS in 1996, and what I do bring is that I've had the wonderful opportunity of leading big businesses for the last 20 years. And in the most recent years of those, I've had the opportunity to experience firsthand how absolutely pivotal the supply chain is to creating and delivering competitive strategies. So if anything, I have a practitioner's knowledge of supply chain, but I hope I bring to you today just a feeling and a sense of how important what you do is, not just to the companies that you work in, but the countries that you are part of. My appreciation for you and for the supply chain started at a very young age. I'm born and raised in a dusty town very close to the Kalahari. It's called Francistown. If you've been there, you blinked, you missed it, you never went back. Okay, but that's where I came from. My parents were farmers and got forced out of that due to drought. That's topical for those of us who live in Cape Town at the moment. Anybody planning their exit from Cape Town when we run out of water, I can give you a few tips of how we handled it when we were in the Kalahari. But my parents were forced out of farming. They ended up buying a little wholesaling business from a family-owned, an Indian family whose children didn't want to know anything more about it. And fortunately for my father, whose only experience in running businesses was briefly running a Checkers in Ilovo, no, not Ilovo, that would be far too smart. It was Hillbrow in those days, in the early 60s. is that the owner of that wholesale decided to stay on and teach him how to run that business. And credit to my dad, he did a fantastic job. He built a very impressive business. But my holidays were spent on the dusty floor of a warehouse. Weekends were stock taking. That's what we did. And one of my earliest memories is the big trucks coming in from Johannesburg, being offloaded. We sold millie meal, sugar, ladies' underwear, kids' clothing, basically anything that a spaza shop in the Kalahari might need, and then reloading that onto smaller trucks that were destined up to Maun. Anybody been to Botswana? Yeah. Anybody went to Botswana 40 years ago? I'm a Generation X, according to RJ and Arbery. I'm not worth knowing. You guys are clearly worth knowing. You're baby boomers, right? Got it, yes. So you remember driving that road, Francistown to Mount, you could basically hide a Pantechnicon in the donga, right? Now, we didn't have cell phones in those days either. So when the truck left, the only way you knew if it arrived was if it arrived. And then somebody would phone you if it didn't arrive. And one particular day, we got the phone call, the truck hasn't arrived. By this stage, my father had realized that driving around Botswana was for the birds. He had bought a small aeroplane, and off we went in the puddle jumper, down the road, got to Nata, turned left. Now we're on a dirt road, and we found the truck, doing a wonderful impersonation of a tortoise. Upside down, wheels in the air, not a driver to be seen, but surrounded by lion. Well, a little alarmed and concerned about the drivers, we bombed past the train, scared the lions off, landed the aeroplane on the road, the donga-driven road. There's no traffic in Botswana 40 years ago. Got out, went to find the drivers, and there they were, having been held up inside their cab for a day and a half, trying not to become lunch. But really, it taught me three things about supply chain. If you're going to work in the supply chain, you better be prepared to roll your sleeves up. It's a dirty business, it's a hands-on business, and it takes people who are really practical. The other thing it taught me about the supply chain is be prepared for the unexpected. Nothing goes according to plan, does it? There's plan A, B, C, and triple Z, right? And then the third thing is just how important the supply chain is, not just to the business that you run, but to the customers that we serve. Because that truck not making it to Maun meant that the spaza shops, the camps in the Okavango swamps that we supported, whom only come out in their white bakkie once every 2 weeks at most, arrived to the wholesale not being able to get the things that they needed to get. That's 2 weeks of supply that they couldn't get their hands on. And importantly for our business, they just went next door to Metro Cash and Carry. The question is, the next time they came into Maun, would they come to Wholesale Centre or would they go to Metro Cash and Carry? So as I say, my appreciation for supply chain started at a very young age. Since then, I joined Shell when I was the tender age of 21. They moved me to Cape Town. I worked in sales and marketing, strategy and portfolio. And in fact, where's Clem again? I think his Mind of a Fox was sort of my back pocket book as I did strategy work. I went over to the UK within 5 years of working with Shell and had the opportunity to run international businesses there, but always on the thin end of the wedge, always on the sales and marketing side. And about 10 years into my career, I sat back and I thought, first 10 years, you can't make a mistake on what you do. You just get experience. The second 10 years, you've got to be a little more careful. What is it you actually want to be doing, Tanya, in 10 years' time? And I wanted to run big businesses. And it was very clear to me at that stage that if I didn't switch into the supply chain and learned how the fat end of the wedge worked and connected what we made to whom we sold it to, there wasn't a chance of me being an effective CEO. And I made the conscious decision to switch into supply chain at that point. Fortunately for me, I worked for a company that is fairly open-minded and said, well, Tanya, you haven't the first cooking clue about supply chain, but you seem to be able to run businesses. We'll give you a go. And my first job in supply chain was running the Northwest Europe hydrocarbon supply lines, basically everything from the refinery gate in 7 countries to the end customer, pipeline, ships, depots, trucks, you name it. What a blooding experience. I learned more in those 4 years than I learned in the 10 years consecutively running sales and marketing. And straight after that, I came back to South Africa, did the same thing here, but quite shortly after returning to South Africa, they asked me to take on the managing director position and lead a fairly major turnaround in the business, which we'll talk about later. So that's the experience that I have. Let's take a little bit of a step back then and think about, so why is it, Tanya, that you think that the supply chain is so important to strategy? Why is it that you feel that there is this amount of potential? Let's first recap on some of the things that were said yesterday. This is the other bad thing about changing days, by the way. If you ever get told, Tanya, you're not speaking on Monday, speak on Tuesday, everybody steals your content on Monday. So by the time you come to Tuesday, you got nothing to talk about. I had a whole plan here. I was going to blow your socks off with all the stuff I know about the future trends. Nonetheless, Sean did that for me and a couple of other people yesterday. So I'll just recap in here. There are 4 certainties. There are 4 things that are definitely going to be shaping our future as we go forward. And in fact, they're happening now. The first thing is that we see the shifting power and influence. Everything is moving east. I'm told that the rate of change of the gravitational center of the world is 140 kilometers an hour, destination China. I don't know if they've got it right, but things are definitely moving towards the east. We're also seeing the shift in terms of social opinions, I guess a disillusionment with the traditional way of doing things. And Douglas Kent yesterday showed us how that's playing out in terms of Donald Trump elections, Brexit elections, Marine Le Pen getting in France, etc. But the shifting power and influence doesn't stop at the macro. It's also at the individual level. You saw what Sean said. The more access we have to information, the more choice we have as consumers, the more power we have in terms of determining what happens next. The other thing that's a given is that we continue to procreate at an alarming rate. We go from 7 billion at the moment to 9 billion in 2050, I think it is, and about 11 billion by 2100. The only difference is that we're not procreating evenly around the world. And we're getting older. 2 billion of those 9 billion in 2050, I understand, are going to be over 60. That's got fairly significant impacts on us. But the bit that I love, and I can't remember who said it yesterday, is that 1.1 billion of the working age people in 2040 are going to be here in Africa. We play an incredibly important role in the future of the world. The other worrying thing is that as we get bigger, less people have work. 100 million people, I'm led to believe, by the time we get to 2050, young people, that's under 25, will be without work. And the majority of those will be women. That hurts me as a woman, actually, but the majority of them are women. Which means that as we hunt for work, we start migrating even faster. 83% of our populations will be living in cities by 2040. 83% of the population. That means 1 in 7 of us will be classified a migrant. The impact that has on our supply chains is quite phenomenal. Imagine trying to deliver things in cities in 2040 with 83% of our population living there, and 1 in 6 of those living in urban poverty. And what happens as we get bigger and there's more of us? We eat more and we use more. So the third certainty is that our resources continue to be constrained. We mentioned water earlier. It is very controversial here at the moment. It's terrifying for those of us who live here. In fact, I read somewhere that if we costed water at its true cost, depending on the availability of water in your natural surroundings, those areas of scarcity, like here, like the Middle East, the true cost of water is $15 a litre. $15 a litre. And if we applied that true cost of water to the largest 100 companies in the world, to their bottom lines, it would wipe up to 30% off the profits of our top companies. That's how important the water shortage is. It's not that we have less water. There's still rain coming out of the sky. It's just that we have so many more people to be able to water. The other thing is that we waste enormously. At the moment, I understand that, and this is today, this is not even in the future, as a planet, we use 1.6 times what the planet can produce on its own. Now, when we get to 9 and 11 billion people, we have to be able to produce 60% more calories every day to feed those people. And today, we waste 2 billion tons of food every year. 2 billion tons of food we waste. Yeah. And as our consumers start getting to middle income, I believe China in 2015 actually exceeded the US in terms of their middle income strata. The demand for consumer goods increases. We guys see that. We go cha-ching, cha-ching, we got more to sell. But what goes with the cha-ching, cha-ching is more plastic. 275 million tons of plastic is what we produce every year. By 2050, we'll have more plastic in our ocean than fish. Yeah. For the supply chain, that's fundamental, isn't it? How do we go about packaging the goods that we sell? How do we go about processing them? And then the fourth one I'm not going to dwell on because, my goodness me, Sean scared the socks off me yesterday. It's the third time I've heard Sean Cooley's presentation. I've told him I'm never listening to him again because all I can think about is, oh my word, what are my grandchildren going to be doing? They're going to be taken over by robots. But it's true, everything is connected. By 2050, we have 1 trillion sensors generating 40 trillion gigabytes of data. That's 10,000 times more data we have today, 100 times faster. What do we do with all of that? We have the artificial intelligence emerging. We have robots taking over jobs. We have robots talking to each other yesterday. Didn't that scare the socks off you as well? I mean, how did they do that? Why did they do that? Are they thinking? Are they feeling? It does feel very much like Terminator 34. That's coming, but everything is connected. The important statistic I came across here for us in the supply chain is that by 2020, it's believed that we will have 83% of our customer interactions will not involve any human contact. 83%. Yeah? Kind of makes sense when you think that 10 years ago we had no smartphones. Today we have 2.3 billion, and by 2020 we will have 6 billion, 80% of those new connections from here in Africa. Yeah. So that's the world that we're living in. And tell me something. Do any of those things that I've just said at the moment now not touch the supply chain? Let's just check, are you still with me? Do any of those things not touch the supply chain? The supply chain becomes absolutely critical to the way we manage going forward. In fact, that research I was just speaking to you about is called the Future Agenda. It's the world's largest open foresight initiative. In other words, you and I can get this information. Just go onto the internet. Every 5 years, they conduct significant interviews around the world, and they come up with these insights. But their big takeout from the 2016 is this. It's that companies won't be competing in the future. Supply chains will. So supply chain management becomes a core, unique selling proposition for companies. So it absolutely astounds me at how undervalued and under-recognized supply chain management is in organizations today. I left Shell about a year ago. I moved into what I'm doing now. I have my own company. It's called Olakira. We work with top executives on combining leadership capability development and strategy development simultaneously. The number of clients that I work with there who don't have supply chain at the table is astounding. For some reason, supply chain is seen as a second-class citizen. Yeah? The servant, master slave, I think is what they call it, is alive and well. Yet when I look at our finance colleagues, who are very much like us in the supply chain, in that they touch every part of the organization, seem to hold some superior position. There isn't a board out there. Tell me, anybody know a board who doesn't have a CFO? Do you? No? Anybody know a board that has a chief supply chain officer? You do? Steve, how many have we got? Couple. We can count them on this hand. So, Apple, GM, Harley-Davidson, these are companies that we would say are at the front end of this wave that are saying, actually, the supply chain is critical to the way that we do business going forward. Yeah? And if we don't have them at that table, how do we make the right decisions? Have a look at these 7 bubbles. These are the things that supply chain bring to the table. Whenever I think of the supply chain, I think of a spider's web. If you think of a spider web, it connects to every part of the organization. But more than that, it connects each of those connectors. We're a translator, a communicator, an interpreter, a deducer. That insight, that value that supply chain brings is enormous. And on top of that, if you're going to be developing strategy, how can you be developing strategy without the group that employs the most people in an organization? Now, in the future, those people might be robots. I don't know if that's going to happen. But at the moment, those people are people. And in most of our companies that are producing a commodity, not necessarily those that are doing a service or an app-based product, but a commodity product, so a widget, something that we produce and we store and we move and we sell, have the majority of people working in the supply chain. And not only are those majority of the people in the supply chain, but the diversity of talent and diversity of skills that sits inside the supply chain, everything from commercial acumen to data analysis to engineering skills to technical knowledge, to human leadership knowledge, to human management knowledge is sitting in the supply chain. It is a well and a repository of the talent for an organization going forward. And even if the investments that the supply chain need to make in the future look more like robotics than today, which is the walls and the wheels, still a large and significant portion of the capital investment and the working capital that we put into organizations resides under the control of the supply chain. yet we design strategy without them at the table. And somebody said yesterday, we might have some wonderful sales and marketing people making deals with clients, selling our product, but who is responsible for delivering it? We have lots of people making promises, but it is the supply chain who keeps that promise. Fastest way to break somebody's trust, to break your consumer's trust, don't deliver what you promised. And the more choice those consumers have and the more demanding they get, as we get into batch size one type mentality that we heard about yesterday, the more important it is that we execute. And you've heard this word VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. That is the world that we're going to be occupying for time to come. Get used to operating in the middle, in the in-between, I think was what the quote said yesterday. And that is exactly where the supply chain comes to its fore. So this is why I believe that the supply chain is absolutely critical to the future. But I think, let me try and make it more practical to you. I mentioned to you before that I had the wonderful opportunity of leading a major turnaround in Shell South Africa. Let me tell you a little bit more about that. And let me show you how much value we derived by leveraging the supply chain. When I arrived back from England to South Africa, having been out of the country for 11 years, I was astounded by what I found in South Africa. The Shell company in South Africa had been for sale, not for sale, for sale, not for sale, for about 7 years. Anybody being caught in a company where you're for sale, not for sale, it's not a good place to be. Huh? No investment comes. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about people, infrastructure, processes, systems, just no investment. So for 7 years, we had done very little. And we're fast being overtaken by our competitors. And when we had a look at that, we said, well, how are we going to turn that around? Well, just in case I don't have a lot of people here who know oil. How many people know oil here? Seppo must be here from Sasol. We've got a few oil people here. But just so that you know what we're talking about, a supply chain and oil. And granted, we know that there are supply chains within supply chains. So I'm talking about the hydrocarbon supply chain. This is how do we get oil out of the ground and to the consumer. These are the steps in it. So we get it out of the ground, crude extraction. Then we trade it. Okay, so you get the big ships around the world. You've seen the trading floors. We sell crude oil. We sell finished product. Those who want to make it, as opposed to just buying a finished product, will then put that crude into a refinery, and they will produce all sorts of different oil products, from gas to lubricants to fuels that you put in your car. And then we have to store that, because invariably we don't make it exactly as we need it. So we have to store it in huge storage plants, usually close to where you've either imported it or manufactured it. Then you have to transport it with big pipelines and so on, closer to your consumer into secondary storage. And in South Africa, we have an anomaly here. 60% of our consumers sit in the middle of the country, 600 kilometers away from where we make anything or import anything. And therefore, secondary storage up near Gauteng is very important. Secondary transport then goes from there, usually a branded truck. It's smaller. It then delivers to the consumers. How many people drive a car in the room? Of course, you all fill up at Shell. When you need to fill up your car, you go through to a retail station. If you're a farmer, if you're a miner, you're going to be using fuel in your big transport, your combine harvesters, your haul trucks. If you are an automotive producer, you're going to be putting lubricants in as a first fill so that the car can drive. If you're a big manufacturer, you might be burning heavy fuel oil to create heat to run your processes. And when we've finished using it, obviously there's a whole waste management around it. So when the leadership team of Shell South Africa and I sat down and we had a look at, so what are the levers that we can pull to turn this business around, we identified 12 levers. And in those 12 levers, every single one of them involved the supply chain. And it's not that we had 16 and I'm only telling you about 12. I'm telling you about the 12 that we had. All of them involve the supply chain. And let me give you a sense of materiality of this turnaround. Now, obviously, I can't give you exact numbers, so bear with me as I give you fudged versions of it, okay? But year one, we were making a loss, net profit loss. Year two, we made a profit, but nowhere near our budget. Year three, we made our budget. Year four, we exceeded our budget by 30%. Year five, we exceeded our budget again. The size and scale of that turnaround is triple-digit million-dollar profit. Okay. Triple-digit million-dollar profit. Every one of the levers that I'm going to show you individually accounted for a minimum of $5 million. So the first thing we had to do was that we had to shore up our resilience. You can imagine if we haven't invested in your infrastructure, that your infrastructure probably doesn't match what your consumer needs. First of all, we had a refinery that kept falling over. When refineries fall over, we don't just put them back up again. It takes about 3 weeks to put them back up again. And if you can't put them up in time, and you can't store enough product because your capacity doesn't match what you need, you have to import it, and that's 3 weeks away. That's just to get it to the coast. Then if you want to get it from the coast to your consumer, that's another 2 weeks. So you have 5 weeks of supply chain and a refinery that's fallen over. Massive investment went into that refinery, not just equipment-wise, very much around skills, competency, and importantly, safety and reliability. A 2% improvement in a refinery's reliability is tens of millions of dollars of improvement. Yeah. Capacity investment, we had invested nothing in the storage facilities around the country, yet for the 9 years that we had chosen not to invest, the country had grown by 3 to 5% a year. So we just didn't have enough storage. We had to invest in our own storage, and we got other people to build storage, and we rented their facilities as well. And then 20, 30 years ago, we built our retail stations. Then the majority of cars were petrol. Now, 60% of them are diesel. So now we had the wrong pumps and tanks underneath the ground. So lining up that supply chain was the first area that we had a look at. Those 3 levers on their own were probably about 30% of the turnaround. The next thing was sales and operations planning. I listen to all of you gurus in this. I'm going to just embarrass myself if I speak about it at anywhere near the depths that I've heard others speaking about it. But what I found when I came back to South Africa was an S&OP process that was basic at best. It was static. It was a month plus 1, 2, 3, never refreshed during that period. It involved no one except for a little group of planners who sat in a boxed room. There was no contribution from the production side, very little from the marketing side. We would go into a month, we would realize we had absolutely no product to cover the demand because we weren't aware that marketing was doing a campaign. Yeah. We didn't even know, was there a refinery turnaround going on? Does that mean that the refinery's closed down for 6 weeks? Yes, it does. Have we mapped that into month 1, 2, 3? Yes, we have, but we just pulled it back by 10%. It's like, no, guys, that's not going to work. So we had to refresh the entire process, refresh the people that ran the process, and refresh the tools, and get it into a scenario-based forward look and a rolling 12-month outlook as opposed to a static process. By doing that, you know what the amazing thing was? Is that we unleashed creativity. All of a sudden, people saw where they could make a change to the business. And these next levers are places where we changed fundamentally the way we looked at aspects of our business. The first was make, buy, blend. You don't have to produce products. You can buy products in the oil industry. You don't have to make it. The fact that we had a refinery meant that we made products. But for 20 years, we made the same slate of products over and over again because that's what the refinery does. Well, no. Does it have to make all of those products? Could we rather import, for argument's sake, our aviation fuels and back those molecules into diesel where we've got high local demand? We made some fundamental shifts in what we chose to make and what we chose to buy. And at the same time, we changed the pricing model to the customer because we made those decisions by understanding the supply-demand curves of the whole regional envelope, not just South Africa. And where the regional envelope was short, in other words, supply was lower than demand, well, then you should be at international market prices, not at local market prices, import prices. Change the way we priced to the customers. And that resulted in different channels. When you're short on molecules, you've got to sell your molecules to where you get the highest net back, right? You don't just sell them to the people you've always sold them to. So really understanding where we made money, which channels gave us the highest net back, and then being ruthless. I think somebody said it at this summit. I think it was Steve. He said, we fired a few customers. That's effectively what we did. We fired a few customers. I know that's heresy to say. But you have to make tough choices when you're in a supply-demand position like that. By the time we got to year 3, when our capacity investment was growing, when our import position was growing, and all of a sudden we had lots of molecules, we turned those channels back on. And of course, we didn't fire them nicely. We fired them very nicely, and they were able to come back. The other area is working capital management. Generally, when you're in supply chain, I don't know, this is my experience, every time you mention that you want to raise stocks, the finance guys have apoplexy. Yeah? Like, and where, Tanya, bless you, are you going to fund that from? Yeah? And there's something about the finance group where they just do think we're a little slower. Yeah? And it's okay, once you learn to speak finance speak, then all of a sudden that they think that you've got something to say. And that was something that came out of the summit as well, is as supply chain, we really need to speak everything other than supply chain speak. And if we can do that, all of a sudden our credibility increases. But what we did here was painted a picture for the finance guys. It said, whilst we're trying to build and correct this resilience in the supply chain, we are losing sales at the retail side. And every sale that I lose is worth, what's the price of fuel at the moment, guys? What's it, about 13 Rand a litre? Huh? I'm losing 13 Rand a litre in a regulated market where the unit margins are actually very attractive. Wouldn't it be better if we had the product to sell? Yes, that would be a fine idea, they said. Well, in that case, we need to do something different. And the something different was we basically sailed ships in. If I didn't have the fixed capacity on shore, let me float it. I cut out 3 weeks of a 5-week chain, so that if that refinery wobbles or there's a run on demand, I just have to get it off the ship into the pipeline. But ships are big, right? You can imagine the investment in US dollars into one ship. At any given point, we could have between 3 and 4 ships floating in Durban, just whilst we were reinforcing that supply chain. Once our walls came out of the ground in Durban and I had an import facility, I could do something different in there. But we actually invested, and I have to be careful of the numbers I use in case Shell hits me with a confidentiality clause, but at least over $100 million at one stage we invested in working capital, just to be able to reinforce. The great thing about working capital is you can turn it on and turn it off quite easily. So when you're not sure about the investment decision that's right for the long term, play around with the working capital. The next series of levers that we pulled were around partnerships. In South Africa, in this supply chain, very specifically in the mode of transport and primary transport, we have parastatals. You heard Seppo talking yesterday in the panel about the use of Transnet. There's Kia. Transnet is key to us in the oil industry. But at the same time, parastatals in any part of the world often operate processes and systems which tie up cash. And particularly when you're talking big movement of fuel, you could have a lot of cash tied up in those parastatals at any given point. We worked really hard on the relationship with Transnet to make sure that the cash cycles could work faster for us. Contract management with our suppliers, particularly on road transport. And I've got a couple of the Imperial guys. There's Kobus at the back, who is a key partner in this one. Changing the relationship from transactional to partnership. How can we work together to not just bring the cost of transport down, because that's not necessarily the right thing to do, but how can we increase the effectiveness of that transport so we've got a molecule of fuel to sell when we need it. And not just on the hard stuff around utilization, gate-to-gate time, turnaround times, but also on the softer side, but equally important side, in fact more important side, the safety of our operations. Because along with everything else that we hadn't paid attention to in Shell, we hadn't paid attention to safety. People were getting hurt. And our partners in that were absolutely fundamental to a turnaround there. And then alliances in the nature of retail station. How many people choose the retail station to fill up their car based on the fuel that is sold versus whether they can get a coffee or a pie or a chocolate bar? Yeah? We hate NGen because they did that Woolies deal. It's a bugger. You see? If we hadn't been snoozing during that time, maybe we would have gotten there. So we had to do a little bit of running to catch up on that. And now, for example, you can go to most of Shell sites in the urban regions and get a decent Vita coffee. So if you're a white man van and you're traveling around the road a lot, you need to get a decent chicken pie and a decent cup of coffee. Yeah, alliances there, but also with your loyalty card, so the tie-up that you now have at Shell with the Clicks Club card. These are important to consumers. Not direct in the hydrocarbon supply chain, but I can't sell fuel if you don't want to buy my pie. Yeah, okay. And then the last area that we looked at was in sustainability and social investment. Particularly here was the Ishcom moment that we all had about 18 months ago. Everybody survived through that. But really looking at our energy consumption and energy independence to be able to keep ourselves running, and in so doing, reduce our energy consumption. And very importantly here, our social investment in triple BEE. As all international companies do, we go for the safest bet, and Shell had insisted on working with suppliers who were international, but had done no transformation locally. And we went on a dedicated effort to be bringing, particularly around our depots in the outer-lying areas, bringing in local suppliers onto our depots to help us with that. $5 million each, ladies and gentlemen, all of that supply chain. Triple-digit million-dollar turnaround in less than 5 years is possible when you do the 13th lever, and that's leadership and culture. 60% of the value that was delivered here was delivered because we invested in the leadership and the culture of delivery in the organization. 60% of that. Yeah. what I found also when I came back from the UK was that unintentionally, the global model of Shell, which was to run international lines of reporting lines, meant that the cohesion at your country level was completely destroyed. So my supply chain manager, my retail manager, my lubricants manager, my HR manager, all reported internationally. And therefore, who pays their bonus? International. Therefore, who do they listen to more? International. What interests my boss fascinates me. Yeah? That's how it goes. We had to work really hard at redefining our purpose as a South African leadership team. This is a South African company run by South African leaders, delivering South African profits for South African employees. Without a robust and sustainable South African business, our silo has no reason for being. It took us a long time to break down those silos, and to be honest with you, we never broke them down completely. There's still a long way to go. You can't fully break the fact that pay and rations is determined somewhere else. Yeah. But we worked really hard at creating that cohesion, and then we worked even harder at creating an absolutely clear strategy that every South African employee, be they a permanent employee or be they a contract employee working for us, which could mean that we touch up to 10,000 people, could affiliate with and be motivated by the strategy for this company in this country, and identify their particular role in delivering that. So we embarked on what we called our Fix, Reset to Grow strategy, and then we communicated like mad. Communication, communication, communication. I said to everybody on my team at the time, you are all CROs, Chief Reminding Officers. Okay. Your job is to be out in our communities, talking to them about the strategy and helping them make sense of what it means to them. I was reminded all the time, and I continue to remind them of what somebody had said to me 5 years before when I'd run a major shutdown operation, so selling most of the Nordic countries. He said to me, Tanya, when you're sick of your own voice, you are only halfway there. And he's absolutely right. So we continued getting sick of our own voices. And we brought our partners in. Imperial is one of our transport providers. We're intimately involved in us discussing right the way down into our driver communities. In isiXhosa and isiZulu, not in English. And not by me, but by people who made an impact on those people's lives. We used industrial theater to engage people so that there could be no limitations or boundaries to what people could say. Whatever was needed, we did to be able to get out and touch all of those people. And we did it again, and we did it again, and we did it again. And then we started looking at how we could reinforce those messages by trying to change what we could within the international matrix structure on reward and recognition. And that then fell to me as the managing director to go and engage with our shareholders. I spent a lot of time selling South Africa to our shareholders. Yes, I know from the outside, South Africa can look like a disaster area. Every time our president put something in the newspaper or something else happened, I got the call from London. What are you guys doing down there now? And I had to explain South Africa to them. But build their belief through our own credibility, our own belief in our strategy, and then to deliver results, and we did that. But in discussing with them, we also changed the way we did our KPIs, and we rigorously followed up those KPIs. Every week, we looked at those 12 levers. What's been delivered, what hasn't been delivered, what's getting in the way, how much money is in the bank, how much money is still on the table. Now, it sounds like a fantastic turnaround. I'm desperately proud of it. Desperately proud of the team of people that I walked into and what we achieved during that time, because we were this close to being closed down. This close. But we've turned that around, and South Africa now continues to be one of the top 10 performers in the Shell stable of companies. But we didn't take it far enough. We still let some sacred cows exist. There were certain things in the South African culture that we didn't tackle and we weren't able to break down, and therefore it's my firm belief that there's another 20 to 30% of value available here, and I'm delighted I still have my shares vested in the company so that I can enjoy those later. There is a new CEO actually in Shell International, Hlonipizwe Mtolo, who I've absolutely no doubt will be taking this journey to the next level. So if there are any competitors here to Shell, watch this space, guys. So leadership and culture, absolutely vitally important. Not so easy to do in a supply chain environment, am I right? Yeah? We're very much in a here and now kind of world in supply chain. We try and go into that boardroom, we try and go into that executive room, we try and put forward ideas around strategy, and all the guys want to say to us is, and where's my toilet paper? Yeah. Why wasn't that toilet paper delivered to the mine? And of course they forget that there were 99,000 rolls of toilet paper delivered on time correctly before that. But the one roll of toilet paper that didn't make it is what you remembered for, am I right? Yeah. It's tough. But I have some really bad news for you and some really good news for you. Okay. The good news for you is that you are the leaders that you have been waiting for. Okay. So the next time you look around yourselves at the organization and go, if only they would do that, they are you. You are the leaders that you have been waiting for. That's the good news. The bad news is it's a hard job. I joked with the summit guys on Friday and Saturday. I said, well, it's a hard job, but that's why they pay you the big bucks. Yeah, nobody said it was going to be easy. And if you want a really good leadership challenge, the best leadership challenge I believe that you can ever get in your career is to lead a supply chain organization, because it touches everything that we've covered. And when I look at what it takes to be a supply chain leader, I'm just, you're real life superheroes. Without a doubt. What do we expect a supply chain leader to be able to do? All of those things. They've got to innovate whilst managing complexity. They've got to build communities. Those are all of their suppliers, the wider social communities that we operate with, whilst being analytical and problem solving. We have to have black belt in financial skills if the financial guys are going to take us seriously and look at our investments. And importantly, we have to have excellent people skills in building our teams, and we have to be able to negotiate sizable contracts. When I first moved from marketing to supply chain, and I told my marketing colleagues I was going to do that, they looked at me and they went, oh, did you not do very well in your last job? I said, no, I think I did all right. They said, oh, mostly people go to supply chain when they've been demoted. I said, okay, well, I've chosen to go there. And they said, then the other half would go, you've gone to the dark side. And for the first 6 months, it was the dark side, because I didn't have a cooking clue what I was doing. But within 6 months, this is what I realized, is that this is where you make the most fundamental impact on the organization and the communities in which you work in. But the one thing that really did surprise me was the very first time I went into a credit meeting in supply. So there I was with my credit manager, and they gave me the spreadsheet in front of me, and I took my finger down the line of everybody I owed. And I said, I think you've got the zero in the wrong place. And she said to me, no, what do you mean? I said, there's no way that we owe people this much money. She goes, no, we do, Tanya, because when I was in marketing, we used to get very excitable if we had an outstanding of about £10,000. This was in the UK. This was £100,000 on the lowest creditor. Yeah? It's a different scale that we're dealing with in supply chain. The cash investment is a different scale. The people that we have to touch, it's a different scale. So be careful what you ask for, you might get it. If you want a leadership challenge, stay where you are. If you're not really up for it, go to sales and marketing. Okay. God, I hope there's nobody from sales and marketing in here. My colleagues are going to shoot me. But let's talk then about if we are the leaders that we have been waiting for, and this is a serious challenge for us, and we have the opportunity to make a significant impact on the businesses in which we work and the communities in which we work, then how are we going to go about doing that? What is it that can really make a difference? Now, I talk about this as organizational health, and the few clients that I've got in the audience here will be rolling their eyes and go, oh, here she goes again. Okay, and yes, here I go again. It is about creating an organization which has a combination of being smart and healthy. What do I mean by smart? What do you think I mean by smart? Organizations that are smart have a license to play. That's all it is. It's your green fees. It's your strategies. It's your technology. It's your finance systems. It's your processes. It's your SAP investments that you're making, or if you don't like SAP, the other ones. It's the S&OP processes that you're investing in. It's everything that we have been trained to do at university and that we have been trained through our career to do, all the smart stuff. But can I ask you a question? Do your competitors do the smart stuff too? Yeah. Because it's the green fees. If you can't do the smart stuff, you're out of business. Look at what happened to BA last week. Okay, they're not out of business yet. Thank goodness they have deep pockets. But an IT disaster like that messes around with your brand. It messes around with your business. It's the basics. You need to have the basics in place. What I put to you is that it's less about the smart stuff and it's more about the environment in which the people work, because it's the people who make the smart stuff happen. Am I right? We don't have robots yet, as far as I know. The health side of it is where we work as leaders to create the water in which the fish swim. Would you agree with me that to the fish, it is the water that's most important? Yeah? Yeah. I had a fish tank once, before I had children. Yeah. I had to practice. Okay. I didn't do very well. But I learned very quickly in that fish tank that if you put the wrong water with the wrong fish, they do that, right? And there's only so many times you can change the fish before people start noticing that Jeff is actually Jeff Mark IV, right? Okay. It's almost impossible, I can tell you, to get a goldfish that is exactly identical to the next one, okay? And then you end up making up a lot of lies to your children about why Jeff suddenly has a spot on his tail, okay? But the point is, you've got to get the right water to make those fish swim. The smart stuff is getting the fish. The smart stuff is getting the fish to swim in formation. The smart stuff is telling the fish where they need to swim to, helping them avoid obstacles. The healthy stuff is the water in which they swim. What happens in a bowl of water, clear bowl of water, if you drop one drop of blue food colorant? No, let's make it red food colorant. What happens? Huh? The whole thing, not just a spot, right? Yeah. The hard thing about water is you can't just scoop out a mistake. You can't just go, oops, a little bit of red food colorant, let's take that out. You have to change all of the water. So if you allow poison to contaminate your fish tank, if you allow poison to contaminate your organization, you are asking your people to go to battle with both hands tied behind their back. And as a leader, that's the wrong thing to be doing. You need to be arming them to the teeth in order to go out and fight successfully. And what are those poisons? Silos, politics, and confusion. That's the poison in organizations. Where meetings happen very amicably, everybody has artificial harmony going on. We call it meeting silence, and then there's corridor violence. Basically, there's blood on the walls outside. And where leaders don't deal with their, excuse my language, I'm going to swear, shit, and leave it to the rest of the organization to resolve the stuff that needs to be resolved by the leadership. Where leaders don't create the clarity of direction and vision that those fish need to be able to swim, and ask them to work it out for themselves. I'm not saying that our fish are not intelligent and couldn't work it out themselves. I'm saying that you're running a very high risk of them connecting dots incorrectly. Create the clarity through cohesion as a top team, and then help those fish swim. If we get that right, and we can never take it away, let me be clear, we're always going to have a slightly pink water. Okay, we can never take it away. We are humans. Darwin was correct in this, survival of the fittest and all that stuff. Okay, humans will play games. That's what we do. But if we can minimize that, what we end up doing is creating an environment where we maximize morale. We've got excited, energetic people who want to come to work. For goodness sake, we spend 10 hours with each other every day. We see more of each other than we see of our family. We better want to do that, shouldn't we? Yeah. Productivity increases and creativity increases. That's where you start unleashing the magic that people have inside them. The stuff that I maintain we still haven't created in robots. Okay. That special human something, when we allow people to operate at their highest potential, the magic that they create. And if we get all of that right, the net outcome, our best people choose to stay. Invariably what happens is the opposite, and the people we really want to get rid of, we can't. Yeah, we've got to. Yeah, it's the best people who choose to stay. That's the environment that we want to be creating. And when we bring smart and healthy together, what happens is that the healthy multiplies the smart. When organizations are healthy and something is missing in the smart, those fish can fuggle or plan like no one else. Sorry for the foreigners. We make a plan. Okay. We can make a plan when we are healthy. What happens when you haven't got something right in the smart? Just something to think about as a leader in terms of the people you want in your organization. When something's missing in smart, we just go and buy it. We go buy a new IT system. Or we go to the competitors and we buy their best person. And we pay them a sign-on bonus. You know what a sign-on bonus is? Come here, tell me everything that you know about them. Okay? So if the best people don't choose to stay, we just buy them and we bring them here. So on the smart side, we spend a lot of money. On the healthy side, it doesn't cost you very much at all. It just takes commitment. So as a leader, to create a fish tank that operates like that, you have to be disciplined. Leadership is not something that we're just born with. Granted, some people might have more natural skill in it. But leadership is something that we need to be practicing. We need to be honing. We need to be perfecting. Anybody on an exercise routine here? Anybody succeeding at that exercise routine? Yeah. Kobus is succeeding better than me because he's lost more weight than me. I've seen that. But if you're on an exercise routine, what is it that you've got to have? Discipline, discipline, discipline. Yeah? Mind over mattress. Yeah. 5 o'clock in the morning. I just want to snooze a bit longer. Mind over mattress is what you need if you're on an exercise routine. It is no different if you're in leadership. There are 4 disciplines that you need to master. The first thing as a leader that you have to be doing is you have to be working tirelessly on creating and sustaining a cohesive top team. Now, it starts at the top because the proverbial fish, let's keep going with this metaphor, rots from the head, right? Doesn't rot from the tail. It rots from the head. So you've got to have a cohesive top team. But that doesn't matter. If you're sitting in the organization and looking at me and saying, Tanya, but I'm not at that top team, so what are you talking about? It doesn't matter where you are in the organization. These disciplines apply. Whether you are an individual contributor and it's about how you contribute to the teams you operate in, or whether you are the leader of a very large supply chain organization, these disciplines apply. And you need to be practicing them from day one in your career. Create cohesive top teams that trust each other, that have interesting and important and constructive conflict about the issues that matter, and that you will argue those issues until you land them, and you make decisions, and you commit to them, and you hold each other accountable to delivering them, and you are obsessed, absolutely obsessed, with delivering collective results. Collective, not individual, not silos, collective results. That's what top teams do. And when they've got that degree of cohesion and they've got that degree of debate and conflict going on, then they are able to create clarity, organizational clarity. Why do we exist? What do we do? How do we make money? How do we differentiate from ourselves? What is the position that we are taking versus our competitors? What do we need to do now, today? The 100-meter race is not won at the 100-meter mark. It's won in the first 10 meters. Watch any sprinter going off the mark. He or she does not lift her head for the first 10 meters, because if he or she falls over in the first 10 meters, the race is over, right? So what's important now? Who needs to do what? And very importantly, how do we behave in this fish tank? What are the values that we hold dear? And what are the behaviors that we expect? Once you've created that clarity, then you've got to over-communicate it. Get sick of your own voice. Get out there and talk to people. Who hates meetings? Come on, you all hate meetings, I know that. Every leadership team I go into, they go, oh, Tanya, I can't stand it. We just spend our life in meetings. And I say to them, well, if you're not in a meeting, what the hell are you doing? Your job as a leader is to talk to people. Your job as a leader is to create the water. Do you think you can create the water sitting in your office? No. You create the water by working with people. That means you're going to be in meetings. Make them effective by all means. Don't waste your time. But you should be dealing with people. How much time do you think the average executive spends on the smart side of the equation out of 100%? Can't hear? 95. James, you've heard this before. I'll pay you later, okay? All right. Yeah. I believe there's an SAB bar upstairs. We'll go there. Okay. He's right. 95% of the time is spent on the smart side, 5% on the healthy side. What do you think it should be, James? Yeah, I think that would be wonderful, but we'd probably be living in a pipe dream. 50 to 60% should be on the healthy side of it, which means you need to be speaking to people, chaps. So get happy with meetings. And then last is reinforcing clarity. This is the bit that I felt we fell over in Shell. We weren't able to really change the underlying human systems that reinforce clarity because of our international structure. And what do I mean by the human systems there? How we recruit, how we develop, how we train, how we incentivize, how we pay, and how we retain people. Particularly how we pay. It's nothing like saying to somebody, the most important thing is that you think end to end, but I'm going to pay you on what you have delivered only. It's confusion, right? So reinforcing clarity, where you can influence the way you design and structure those human systems, influence them, but influence them once you've created cohesion, clarity, and you've communicated. Don't do it the other way around. I have been through more restructurings than I can care to remember. You guys been caught in restructurings? Classic problem in management. Oh dear, this is not working. We're not delivering any money. Let's move the chairs on the Titanic. Let's reorganize. I would say to you, let's start with what we're trying to do, how we're going to do it, and then move the chairs to deliver that. So it is possible to get leadership healthy. It is possible, if you are disciplined, to be more effective as a leader. And I put to you, if we bring good leadership together with the potential that the supply chain has, imagine the magic we can make. And with that, I thank you for taking your time and listening to me.